Welcome back. In today's video, I wanted to share with you some of the methods and ways that I have been working on improving my speech and my ability as a communicator. And I'm also working on reflecting an elegant and more feminine tone in my speech. Before we get started, if you are not already subscribed, I would love to have you subscribe and come along with me for this journey. If you're new here, my name is Leisha and I upload similar discussions like this every week, updates and how I'm doing and progressing on my personal journey. I find that it is wonderful to have a community where we're all on the similar path and working towards a similar goal. The first thing that I wanted to get started with is giving you a little bit of context around my background with speech and language learning specifically. So that gives you a place to know where I personally am coming from in improving my speech. For some reason, at a very young age, I was very interested in being fluent in multiple languages. I am fluent in Spanish, and as a result, I have become very aware through that of my deep Southern English accent. So I was born and raised here in the South. I also have tutored Spanish for several years, so I've applied some of my methods from teaching language to my students, and I also worked back and forth in Guatemala for a couple of years. Now, none of this back then had anything to do with where I'm at leveling up today. In fact, leveling up was very far off of my radar back then, but again, I wanted to share that just so that you know where I'm coming from and what my background is and how I'm applying that to what I'm learning today. Now, here's another thing that I wanted to share with you as well. I've actually had some comments on my videos about my Southern accent and the way that I pronounce certain words, things like that. And so I have, like I said, become very aware of my Southern accent. In fact, growing up in the South, I don't know or remember really what triggered it, but it was almost like I knew that there was a stereotype around having a Southern, or sometimes referred to as a country accent, and that often some people, or actually many people, I feel like from other regions, view people with a Southern accent as less intelligent or less capable. And so for me, I almost felt some shame around that. And so that was another reason why I became hyper aware of my accents and the way that I spoke. Funny story is that in college, I remember one of my Spanish professors saw me in the student recreation center and just said hello, and I said hello back, and he said, "Wow, I didn't realize that you had such a sweet Southern accent." That's actually because he'd mostly only heard me speak Spanish in class, so he was not aware that I actually had this accent. That was the degree which I had worked on removing as much of my deeper Southern drawl from my speaking ability as possible. So just wanted to say that to illustrate that this is something I originally worked on as far as the way that I speak goes. Sentence structure, I think, is something that has greatly improved for me since leveling up, as well as my grammar and word choice. Having a certain accent is one thing, but your grammar, your tone, your sentence structure, that is another, and that is what I chose to work on mainly and focus on when it comes to leveling up and working on having an elegant and feminine tone. Before I speak about the methods that I used, the very specific and practical methods, I want to give you the goals that I had decided on for myself as of last year when I first started focusing so heavily on bringing more elegance and femininity into my life. The first one was I wanted to work on making sure I was aware of my audience, the setting that I was speaking in, and make sure that I selected the words and tone of voice accordingly. For example, I speak differently at home with my husband and even here on my YouTube videos than I would necessarily in the office in a professional setting and that sort of thing. The second goal that I had was to make sure I use my own authentic voice. So no copying, no speaking like a character and having to maintain that character in an inauthentic way, if you get what I'm saying. I wanted to make sure that I didn't sound like I was from Europe when really I'm not from Europe, and I live and work and interact with people here in the Southern United States. The third goal that I had for myself was, of course, to bring an elegant and feminine flair to my ability to speak. Now, again, I didn't want to become inauthentic here, but I wanted to be able to understand how to choose my words, my sentence structure, and tone of voice accordingly. The fourth thing that is a very important goal, especially for those of us here in the South where we tend to mumble our words and jumble them all together, is I wanted to make sure that I learned how to enunciate. I wanted to be able to speak very clearly so that I could be a clear communicator, and anyone that I was interacting, no matter what culture, as long as we were speaking English, would be able to understand what I'm saying. I decided that I would remove slang words. I would be careful with any colloquialisms that were more regional that maybe not anyone would just understand, especially again in those settings where my audience is broader and I'm not just at home with my husband. Now I'd like to answer the question, what have I practically done and what do I do in order to maintain my progress in remaining an eloquent speaker? So what I did was I took a lot of the concepts from teaching and tutoring Spanish as a second language to young students. The first thing that you need to keep in mind when learning really any concept, not just language or speech, is that there are components to being able to learn and have something stick and become ingrained in you. The first one is often, we'll just start with visual component. So you need some kind of visual component to look at in order for you to pick up that concept faster. For me, I decided that I would write out my sentences, especially for the times where I was going to be speaking in front of people. So every one of my YouTube videos, I wrote out almost exactly what I was going to be saying and trying to communicate. I also did this for any meetings that I had to speak in front of a large number of people at my job, and so on and so forth. Writing it out allows you to actually see it, and it also actually covers number 2 a little bit, which is making sure that you have a hands-on component to what you're trying to learn. So writing for me is something that is hands-on. It's also visual, so you cover those bases at the same time. But also when I say hands-on, I mean you have to physically practice. So I started to get in a lot of physical practice by sitting down and recording myself on camera each week. I also got my physical practice in through taking a speaking certification course, which was through my job. So my company did supply us with a certification course for becoming a speaker, where we could be certified if we were going to go speak to a professional group or at a conference, a business conference or something like that, and we would be certified to represent the company. Now, I will mention and give you a tip that this program I did was very closely or loosely, I would say more closely than loosely, based off of the Toastmasters curriculum, which has regional chapters in different cities, and I know that there are some chapters in the US and possibly throughout the world and online, if Toastmasters is something that might interest you. In the program, we practiced looking at other examples of speakers and speeches. We looked at how to put together persuasive speeches, how to use tone of voice, how to research our audiences. There were a lot of components in that course that I took, and of course we had to give speeches along the way that allowed us to practice and get that hands-on experience. The other component that I wanted to mention when you're learning a new topic is you have to have an auditory component, okay? So what I do quite often to get to this point is I actually listen to other people speaking, and whenever I have found a speaker that I really gravitate towards and I enjoy listening to, I would see what I could pick up from their style of speaking and communicating and add that into what I wanted to work on for myself in, of course, my own authentic way. So for example, I really enjoy listening to Brendan Burchard speak. He has a lot of energy. He has very thoughtful and well-placed sentence structures and tone of speech and voice when he is giving a presentation or when he is on a podcast, and in his writing as well. So that's another thing that you can do. It's not necessarily auditory, but maybe visual learning for sentence structures is reading a lot of books. And when you find a writer that you really enjoy reading their work, you can ask yourself, why is that, and pick apart a few of the sentences or words that they use and add those into your vocabulary or sentence structures. I find that if you are working and focusing on improving your ability to speak to a professional audience, read more books that are written for professional audiences. I find that business books really helped me a lot with that. So that is another practical tip I would give you, is to make sure you pick up some books, make sure you grab some podcasts, and listen to YouTube videos. Before I wrap things up, the last thing that I wanted to say is just a little word of encouragement from my personal experience. You have to be okay with not being perfect all the time. In some of my earlier videos, I still to this day will get comments from people commenting on how I speak, and it's sometimes in a negative way, but sometimes in a positive way, where they've watched some of my more recent videos and noticed that I have improved my speaking and communicating ability, and they've just now gone back to those old videos and realized all the work that I've done. It hurt, honestly, at first. It was hard to look at some of those comments and that feedback, but I kept in mind that this was something that I was working on. It was a work in progress, and so put yourself into that position and understand that if you receive a little bit of criticism or negative feedback about your speaking ability, if that's coming from a place where you know that it's something you're working on, then that's great. Another quick comment about my accent and the way that I speak somewhat is that, again, remember to be aware of your audience and your setting. If I walked into a meeting at work one day and started speaking like a European, pronouncing my A's like ahs and that sort of thing, very quickly my coworkers would pick up that that's not very authentic of me. And so your setting and your culture and your surroundings are very important, but find what is a very happy medium and an improvement for your setting and your culture. And I think that, as always, it's best in a formal setting to remove any slang words and be very mindful of sentence structure. When you're speaking, you want to speak clearly, but in a casual setting at a party or just with your family, it's perfectly fine to use a few of those slang words and those cultural vocabularies that you may only be able to use with those people, and they'll completely understand what you're saying. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this was interesting for you, and that through sharing how I've been working on this, you may have found something that you can take with you today and use to improve your speaking abilities. Again, please don't forget to subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up if you want to see more videos like this. I do look at that and determine what videos I'm going to share sort of based around that, although remember, I'm documenting my personal experience, so I usually try to share whatever's on my mind and that I've been working on from that week and thinking about a lot. But I listen to your suggestions. I'm really grateful for your comments. Let me know down below if you have been working on improving your speech and if you have any really great tips that you would love to share with all of us as well. If you have not caught up with one of these videos here yet from my journey, I will leave them here on the screen, and I will see you there. Until next time, bye.